Hello, this is the news on NTA International. You can watch these news on Vision TV 247 and other social media platforms displayed on your screen. I am Olajide Bello. First, the headlines. Communities react to ECOWAS decision on Niger, Mali and Guinea. Say a decision shows the commitment of the bloc to regional stability. Nigeria calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, emphasizes position on two-state solution to address the Israel-Palestine crisis. Demonstrations in Senegal for and against President Macky Sall's administration. Nigerians in neighboring communities in Nigeria and the Benin Republic have reacted to the ECOWAS decision to lift the economic sanctions imposed on Niger. The sanction, especially border closure, has affected businesses in neighboring communities in Nigeria and Benin. Musababa Aliyu reports.
This was the situation at the ever-busy border post between Nigeria and Niger Republic in Katsina State. The border is closed and the area is deserted, with zero activities following the sanctions imposed on Niger. This woman from Jibia, a border community in Katsina State, lament that the restriction of vehicular movement across the border is affecting them. There is no means of transportation, so we decided to walk to visit our family over there, she says. This farmer said the closure of the border has affected the social and economic well-being of the people.
Presently now, we are in Sopa. All our people here, they were suffering. Because of what? Because we know that they close border, and border. So this border, people that should go to buy, we will enter to buy.
His view corroborates that of the Arewa Economic Forum that the restriction of movement of goods and services affected a 13 billion naira business on a weekly basis. And this is the situation at the Niger-Benin Republic border. Hundreds of trucks were blocked from going or coming to Benin. We spent days here and most of the perishable goods we were to deliver spoiled, he says. However, there are signs of relief following ECOWAS' decision to lift the economic embargo in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali and Guinea.
This decision is based on humanitarian considerations, especially as we are in the month of Lent and as we prepare for the holy month of Ramadan.
Community in Nigeria, Niger border and that of Benin Republic thank the ECOWAS for considering the economic situation associated with the sanctions. It is hoped that in the next 24 hours, borders will be opened and power supply restored to Niger from Nigeria. Musa Baba Aliyu, NTA News.
Northern Senators Forum commends ECOWAS leaders for lifting sanctions imposed on Niger, noting that the decision shows the commitment of the bloc to regional stability, cooperation and respect for human rights. The forum is confident that the decision serves as an example for resolving issues through dialogue and diplomacy, and advised regional stakeholders to pursue peaceful solutions to address concerns for progress and development. In a statement, the spokesman of the forum, Senator Kau Sumaila, urges the government of Niger to hasten the process of returning to democratic governance. Thousands protest as Senegal awaits new election date following an order handed out by the Constitutional Court urging the president to hold the general elections without further delay. Even though some nationalists are in support of the postponement by President Macky Sall, while others are against it. Kolo Mohammed tells us more.
Demonstrators for and against President Macky Sall's decision took to the streets in Senegal on Saturday, with the country tangled in political crisis following the postponement of this month's scheduled presidential election. Macky Sall has faced an uproar since he pushed back the vote scheduled for February 25th, triggering one of the West African nation's political crises. The Constitutional Council overturned the delay and last week called for the vote to be held as soon as possible. Macky Sall has put off the decision until after talks with political and social actors from Monday in hopes to reach an agreement by late Tuesday. This has left Senegalese people in the dark as to when they will be able to vote and create a political clamor for the election to be held as soon as possible. Saturday's opposition protest saw hundreds answer the call of the F-24 grouping to gather on a sandy open space in a working-class quarter of the capital. Most of the protesters chanted in local dialect, "We want elections." Some others labeled Mr. Sall as a dictator. Kolo Muhammad, NTA News.
And we just re-established contact with our guest who is going to talk on the ECOWAS decision. And he is no other person but Dr. Abu Hamisu from the University of Abuja. He is a political scientist and expert on Sahel security. Dr. Hamisu, you're welcome to the news at NTA International.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, reactions have continued to trail the suspension of the ECOWAS sanctions on Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. What is your take on this?
Well, for me, it is a welcome development. At the first instance, ECOWAS is not a political organization. ECOWAS is a political organization that is dedicated to free movement of goods, services, and people across Africa, West Africa. And it is meant to enhance the living condition of the people, not to impose poverty and suffering on the same people. It is supposed to promote their interests. And when you look at the narratives around the entire crisis, these countries that were under sanctions were having upper hand because of the following reasons. First, the narrative was that they have no any issues with their fellow African brothers, that the only thing that is at stake is the sovereignty of their nation, because they believe that their nation has been destroyed beyond reasonable doubt by the elites that are governing those countries, and insecurity has become their whole lot and poverty, and that they can't put their hands and allow their country descend into anarchy, so they have to act in the decisive interest of their people and their nation. And that what ECOWAS is doing is exactly the position of France, and that they are fighting against France, and that Nigeria and other countries are just mere tools that are being used under ECOWAS to fight these particular countries that meant well for their people. And therefore, the sympathy was with the countries that were under sanction, those countries that we mentioned, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And when they threatened that they live in ECOWAS, it was a very strategic move. And I said it here that the joke is on ECOWAS, because that strategic move will lead to a situation, and the situation is where we are now. So for me, it's a victory for Africa. It's a victory for the fight against insurgency in the Northeast. It's a victory against small arms and light weapons that are finding their ways from Libya, Yemen, through Niger, down to our borders that are killing us. And I continue to say that we cannot antagonize a country that is strategic to the fight against insurgency in the Northeast. Majority of our troops used to get their supply in Niger. So how do you start antagonizing this country in the name of restoring democracy to the people? The same democracy that the people said it is not working for their interest. So what is our own interest?
All right, Dr. Hamisu, some people have been commending the Nigerian president, President Bola Tinubu, as the leader of ECOWAS for this suspension. How do you see the ECOWAS decision?
Well, while it's needed to be commended for heeding to the voices of reason, I think the credit should go to General Gowon, because it was General Gowon that proposed this very particular way out, saying that if there will be negotiation and normalcy within the ECOWAS sub-region, the sanctions must be lifted before we could talk about any other issue. Remember, when this issue started, it is the president of Nigeria and other few presidents of African countries that escalated the situation by threatening Niger with invasion. And that led to their renunciation of their membership of ECOWAS, which led us to where we are. But if there is anybody to be commended first, it should be General Gowon for saying that as a founding father of ECOWAS and one of the surviving founding fathers, he could not even wait to see ECOWAS disintegrating in his lifetime. And he threw the hat in the ring by calling on the ECOWAS country to rescind their decision by lifting these sanctions. So for me, the first credit should go to General Gowon, and then the president must be commended by playing the part of peace rather than the part of war that he started with. So for me, both of them supposed to be commended. But first, the commendation should go to General Gowon before the president.
Okay, how will the olive branch stretched to the 4 countries affect the economy of the countries within the bloc?
You see, even before the white man came to erect the artificial boundaries that we have today as boundaries, and unfortunately, it's even laughable. By the time we get to our borders, we know that there is no boundary at all between us. There is no boundary between the north and Niger, because historically the empires that govern that one particular part of the country were interwoven, and then there were intermarriages. So this one particular interaction has spent centuries. The sanction really hurt almost everybody, including diplomats that are in Niger, our diplomats that are in Burkina Faso. So it is a terrible situation. Our people, and that is one of the challenges we are facing today. Normal trade that ought to have made easy the free flow of goods and services within these far countries and the rest of African countries was disrupted by the sanction. And then the people resorted to smuggling. And that is why we are experiencing inflation in commodity prices in Nigeria, because these countries and their business persons are willing to pay triple of the normal amount they are supposed to pay. But because of the sanction, they are paying more than 5 times. And that is why everywhere in Nigeria, food are being mocked. And then these food are finding their ways through the borders, whether they are closed or they are open, they still have a way through the borders, and they find themselves in this country. So it is a mutual consequences for all of us. Let us not pretend. We need their grains, we need their animals, they need our fuel, they need some of our manufactured goods, they need some of our cereals that we are producing in Nigeria. So it's a mutual thing. If you understand it, it is not a one-directional flow. Of if it were to be before that Niger has no oil, we would have said it would be very difficult for them to survive. But they have oil just like Nigeria. So it is a mutual destruction that we were heading towards. But we thank God that that has been averted by the voices of reason that have pulled us back from the drinks, because the war is not our war. It has always been like that. The wars are orchestrated outside the continent of Africa, but we fight the war and we kill ourselves for no just reasons other than some frivolous excuses. And I continue to ask, at a point in time, Nigeria was in a mess. It was the military that sorted it out and handed over the current constitution that we are operating. And so why should we deny other African countries the same benefit of using the military to solve their own problems? And who said democracy is the only form we need to practice?
Many thanks, Dr. Abu Hamisu, political scientist and an expert in cybersecurity, for your thoughts on the news on NTA International.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on, Zambian Vice President Mutale Nalmango says there is need to look at the legislation that will address low women participation in politics and leadership positions.
It really is a room filled with women striving to find solutions to the low numbers of women participating in politics. These are some of the parliamentarians who have made it on the political scene, and they share their stories.
Without women, there will be no democracy. Without women, there will be no development. This is why we are called the backbone of society. Why is it that when we are doing unproductive activities, we are brought to the front? And when they are productive activities, we are told, wait. However, let me announce something to say, any woman in here, whichever walk of life you're coming from, local, politics is a job like any other. A doctor, engineering, construction. We are not seeking sympathy for being in politics. It's a job. It's a noble cause.
The Women's Parliamentary Caucus is concerned with the low numbers of women in politics and has called for more to be done to allow women actively take up such roles.
The caucus's priority at the moment is to have all current serving members of parliament to retain in the next assembly of Zambia. Because if we do not retain them, it will mean others will even be discouraged to come on board.
And Vice President Mutarina Lumango, who is also acting president, officiated at the roundtable meeting and said government is aware of the challenges women face when aspiring for political leadership and is hopeful the challenges will be resolved.
So we need to look at the legislation. We need to hold hands. Madam, we can hold all the workshops, probably NGOCC and the lobby. We may remember a few times in the lobby and in the women's wing where I would say, you see, don't bring us to these meetings only and train us only, empower us.
And UN Assistant Secretary General also shared her view on the matter.
We have to be intentional about using whatever position we have to promote the opportunity for a young woman somewhere on this continent to get a chance to lead. Democracy has no chance without women leaders, and development definitely has no chance.
Various cooperating partners have also reaffirmed their support to Zambia in increasing the women's participation in politics. With eyes focused on 2026, these women are working to ensure that more women join the race.
You're watching the news on NTA International. More reports. Thanks for being there. Former U.S. President Donald Trump was at a lightning victory Saturday at South Carolina's Republican primary. Khalil Mohammed has details.
Donald Trump completed a sweep of the first four major nomination contests, converting a year of blockbuster polls into a likely insurmountable lead going into the Super Tuesday 15-state voting bonanza in 10 days. Nikki Haley had vowed to fight on regardless of the outcome.
I don't believe Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden.
But Trump, seeking to move quickly from the primary to the general elections, did not mention her once during the victory speech in which he turned his fire on Biden.
And we would have never had any of those problems. We wouldn't have had Israel attack. We wouldn't have had Ukraine and Russia fighting and killing everybody and blowing up their cities. And we wouldn't have had inflation because it was started by energy. It was started by oil.
Haley had repeatedly questioned the 77-year-old former president's mental fitness and warned another term presidency will bring chaos. But her efforts appear to do little to damage his stance among Republicans. Khalil Mohammed, NTA News.
Minister of Information and National Orientation Mohammed Idris calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and emphasizes Nigeria's position on a two-state solution to address the crisis in Palestine, ensuring the rights and sovereignty of both Palestinian and Israeli people. Idris was speaking at the extraordinary session of the Islamic Conference of Information Ministers held on Saturday in Istanbul, Turkey. He was represented by the head of mission of the Nigerian embassy in Turkey, Ambassador Zayed Abdul Salam. The Nigerian minister condemns the coordinated and sustained targeting of journalists by the Israeli security forces in the ongoing conflict in Palestine, stressing that the action represents flagrant violations of press freedom and human rights. Mohammed Idris urges his colleagues to always insist that the truth is upheld at all times by demanding a conducive atmosphere to enable the media to carry out their duties, denouncing any attempt to distort the facts and whitewash the humanitarian situation in Palestine. Japan has affirmed its intent to continue supporting the African Development Bank's poverty reduction and resilience building interventions amid global challenges. This was during Masato Kanda, Japan's Vice Minister of Finance for International Affairs, visit to the bank's headquarters. The first of such visits signifying his country's commitment to partnering drive development across Africa. Justin Bemwe reports.
Japan's Vice Minister of Finance for International Affairs, Masato Kanda, and his delegation met for discussions with the President of AFDB, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. He affirmed that Japan is committed to helping the bank to contribute further in mitigating humanity's challenges, as he emphasized the bank's strategic importance under Dr. Adesina. Mr. Kanda submitted that the status of the African Development Bank has increased globally under President Adesina's strong leadership, saying Japan has strong confidence in its leadership of the bank.
Particularly under the strong leadership of President Adesina, we can count on the contribution of this bank to not only to this continent but for the whole world.
Adesina lauded Japan's substantial contributions as discussions also centered on innovative approaches like hybrid capital and special drawing rights to enhance the bank's impact.
I had fantastic discussion with the Honorable Minister about a number of areas about how we can continue to innovate and make sure that, it's very supportive of our work on hybrid capital, very supportive of our work in also SDRs, special drawing rights. And Japan, of course, is working very closely with us on private sector. We have a fund, which is a Japanese impact fund for $100 million, for which the African Development Bank will put in $10 million of equity.
In August 2022, the bank and Japan launched a $5 billion financial cooperation under the fifth phase of the Enhanced Private Sector Assistance for Africa initiative covering 2023 to 2025, which Adesina noted is progressing well. Japan's support extends to co-creating an investment ecosystem with the African Development Bank. This effort gathered momentum at the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development TICAD 8, held in Tunisia in August 2022. Adesina's follow-up visit to Japan in April 2023 further strengthened ties. Justin Bemwe, NTA News.
The nexus between infrastructure and economic growth was the dominant point of conversation at a forum of mechanical engineers in Abuja. Kelvin Eonoaye reports that the event was also used to install Al-Hassan Abdul Muhammad as the 16th national chairman of the Nigerian Institution of Mechanical Engineers.
Over time, the role of adequate infrastructure in economic development has been stressed, but the challenge has always been how to translate the ideas into concrete policy that will prepare the input of professional engineers in the policy implementation. That challenge is what experts at this forum want government to surmount so that Nigeria can reap the full benefit of its indigenous professionals.
The situation now calls for partnership between the elements of our innovation system to produce a new generation of young Nigerians, free, educated, technological literate, who will become the scientists who can push the edge of technology, the business leaders and engineers who are technopreneurs that can transform knowledge into goods and services demanded by internal and global markets.
For the new national chairman, keying into the various opportunities provided by the gap in infrastructural need of the country as well as professional development of members is paramount. In Abuja, Kelvin Eonoaye, NTA News.
And up next is Sport Update with Suleiman Musa as our guide.
We begin with football. The Nigerian Super Falcons will host Lionesses of Cameroon in the return fixture of the Olympic qualifiers in Abuja after the both sides played a goalless draw in Douala on Friday. The winner of the encounter automatically qualifies for the Paris Olympic later this year. To athletics, Nigeria's Rosemary Chukwuma is the Big 12 women's 60-meter champion after she led a Nigerian first and third finish with Success Omokoro. Rosemary ran 7.23 seconds for the win, while Omokoro was third in 7.28 seconds. Similarly, Tomitope Adesina was in a class of her own in the women's high jump at the Big 12 Championship in Texas, where she cleared 1.90 meter for the win. She was cleared of Sherry Eno, who took second with 1.80 meter, same as Trinity Tomlinson in third place. To a little bit of handball, as the Nigerian under-18 boys are champions.